We just began yesterday the first tenet of Jewish belief. And the tenet, just to read it again, is Ani Mamin Be'emunah Shlema. I believe with absolute belief, unswerving, unquestioning belief, Shabori Yisbarach Shmo, the creator of blessed, his name should be blessed, Borei Umanig L'chol Abruim. He creates and he guides all that's been created. That's as far as we got yesterday. So I explained, it doesn't say Borah, he created in past, but Borei is in the present. Grammatically speaking, Borei is in the present. He's Boreg. He's continuously in a creative mode, Umanig, and he guides all that has been created, all that's created. Now, what is the objective of creation? Of course, the objective of creation was for the sake of Torah, which is alluded to in the first two words of the Torah, for the sake of Torah, for the sake of the Jewish people, who are the chosen. We're the only people who have the capacity to receive the Torah, and what do we do with the Torah? What exactly is the value of the Torah? So we had explained that the value of creation is that we should be beneficiaries to merit based on the challenges which we succeed to meet, to be able to merit, to partake of God's goodness, to be able to cleave to God, which is the ultimate of goodness, because since God, whatever he is in the absolute context, absolute. So if God is good in the absolute sense, the beneficiary of that good is being part of absolute goodness. That's the concept. But what is the objective of creation? The world should reach a level of perfection. Perfection is a very important word. Adam initially was created nearly perfect. He was 99.999 perfect, near perfection. If he would have met the challenge of not to eat of the tree of knowledge, he would have achieved 100% perfection. And that exactly was the objective of creation. And since the world was created to be the playing field for Adam, if he would have succeeded, all that has relevance to him would have reached the level of perfection, because man is the center of the universe. So if he achieves perfection, all that's associated with him is elevated to a perfect state, because all that is to accommodate him, the perfect being. But not only did he not achieve perfection, he introduced something into existence which was never part of existence, which was evil, as a result of eating of the tree of knowledge, which is good and evil. So now he's not only lacking in perfection, he cannot be perfected regarding his physicality, because since in that physicality there's intermingled and intermeshed unadulterated evil, which was the most lethal level of evil contained within that fruit. So the only way he could be purged of that, he must die. He decomposes to a level of dust, and when his remains will be resurrected, when God chooses to bring about resurrection, that pure matter will be resurrected and reconnected with the soul. And that would be part of eternity. But once he ate of the tree of knowledge, his body can no longer be eternal, because evil cannot be part of eternity, because eternity is having that relation with God, and God has no relation with something which is evil. Therefore, he must die, and therefore God said to him initially, the day you eat of the tree of knowledge, you'll be subject to death. You cannot be that eternal being any longer. But what's the objective of creation? For man to reach a point where he's perfected himself to his best ability, meeting sufficient challenges, and the world reaches perfection. So let's talk about history. We left Egypt. We spent 40 years in the desert. We went into the promised land. The first temple was built. We failed. Because we failed, the Jews were involved in idolatry, adultery, and murder. The temple was destroyed. We went to exile. Exile is part of the purging process. It's punishment, to be rehabilitated. But as much as we were rehabilitated, the second temple was not at the level of the first temple. Just as after the first tablets were broken and we reinstated with the second tablets, we were no longer on the same level after the second tablets as the first tablets. What's proof in the pudding? Initially, if we would have sinned with the golden calf and the tablets wouldn't have been broken, we would have achieved a level of perfection, even the physical sense, and we would have been part of eternity at that moment. There would have been no need for a Mishkan, for God to dwell in our midst. We were sufficiently perfect that we ourselves would have been the domicile for God's presence. As the patriarchs were the location of God's presence in this world, the Jewish people themselves were the location, would have been the location of God's presence. But because we failed with the golden calf, which was idolatry, our presence became putrefied due to the idolatry. The only way God could dwell in our midst is through a medium, which is called Mishkan, which had to meet God's specifications to build it with the materials and everything else that went along with that. So we needed a medium. We came to Israel, we built a temple. The temple was destroyed because the Jews failed. We went to exile. The second temple, we were not at the level of the first temple. It was the miracles of the first temple did not repeat themselves in the second temple. There were certain things that were lacking the second temple, which were in the first temple. It's because, again, we were no longer at the level of which we were meant to be at the first level, and we were at the point of no return to that level. So God dealt with us in our diminished state, spiritual state. What happened after so many years? Second temple was destroyed. Because we weren't worthy, even at that lesser level, we weren't worthy of having that relationship. What happens? The Edomites destroyed the temple. We still haven't recovered. We're still waiting for the rebuilding of the third temple. Our spirituality hasn't achieved a level sufficiently perfection in the imperfect state. Therefore, the third temple hasn't been rebuilt. But what happened during this period of time? We had peaks, we had valleys, and we had things worse than valleys. We had the destruction of Second Temple. We had displacements. We had crusades. We had pogroms. We had holocausts. All this is part of an atonement process. Not that we understand exactly how the punishment fits the crime or the transgression, but it's all part of God bringing us to a point which ultimately, which we don't understand how we're going to arrive at that destination, arrive at a level of perfection. So God continuously has to tweak the system. So not only does God will existence continuously, which is the equivalent of initially creating the world, ex nihilo. The ex nihilo process is an ongoing process. As God said initially, let there be. God says, let it continue to be. But every moment he says, let it continue to be, it's the equivalent of the ex nihilo of the original creation of existence. However, as we continue the continuum, it's not exactly the same. Why? Because we made many detours. And we were in many deep, deep pits, which we had to be extricated from those pits to again keep going to achieve that level of destination. So not only does God continuously create, God guides. Manig, he guides us, he leads us, because the guidance is ultimately to meet challenges that if we succeed, we're going to arrive at our destination, which will be worthy of the third temple, the coming of Mashiach, the anointed king, and the purging of all evil from this existence. That is the ultimate objective. When evil will be purged from this existence, the world will achieve a level of perfection. Although it's a different level of perfection, but again, so that's why it's not enough to say that God continuously creates, which is borei, but he's manhig. God is also guiding, because the guidance is like a person, you have a detour, so he has to create the means to detour, to get around the problem, to be able to continue on our journey, which is ultimately, which we will achieve perfection for that reason. Rabbi Tzadok writes, in terms of Chasidus, person who is devoutly righteous, he speaks about Dveikus b'Hashem, or Avas Hashem, loving God, cleaving to God. And he explains over there that if a person really loves God and understands whatever God does, it's only in our best interest. Although we don't understand, then the person is never, ever distracted. But he says the two levels of people. You have a person who recognizes that he has a gangrenous limb, and he understands that unless the surgeon removes the limb, he will die. And the surgeon explains it to him why it has to be removed. And if it's not removed, how his life could not continue. So as a result of understanding that, he has tremendous appreciation and love for that doctor who provided that service to extend his life, because otherwise his life would have ended. So what's the love based upon? Understanding that as painful as it may be, although he's going to end up a cripple or without a limb, he's appreciated, so he loves the doctor because he understands it's something which is necessary. And not only is it necessary, whatever he has to gain in the future is only due to what the surgeon does for him today. The Talmud tells us, Aramaic, whatever the merciful one does, he does only in our best interest. We may not understand it, but if a person puts it in the context, if God loves us as we know he does, why is he doing this? Why did the person have that financial reversal? Why did he have that illness? Why did he have that injury? Why did he have that displacement? Understanding that it is impossible for God to do anything unless it's in our best interest, not only will you not be upset with God, you'll be appreciative as that person is appreciative to the surgeon for removing that gangrenous limb to extend his life. If God is doing it, it's a necessity. So not only should we not have a claim, it should actually intensify our love for God. But that's a person who you have to put it in that context, because the person understands its value. As a result of that, the person himself is appreciative. But there's another level of love, that a person's relationship is so exceptional, he doesn't put it into any context. There's never an issue ever that a person questions why he's doing it. I'll give you an example. A person has a relationship with somebody for 50 years. And whatever he's done for him for 50 years, it was only something which he gained, was his best interest. And the reason why he is what he is because of what that other person provided. After 51 years, the person says, give me a substantial amount of money and I will invest it, and you're going to be very fortunate in terms of what the return will be. And he sees him doing something with the money which seems to be just to the contrary. He will cause him a loss. and it will harm him. The person knowing the nature of this person for 50 years, he understands whatever he sees, he doesn't understand. And immediately he gives the benefit of doubt. There's not a question, not even a flicker of question in his mind that what's happening at this moment is to his detriment. Because the level of love rooted in the relationship, it's an impossibility. See, he doesn't have to think it's like a gang or slim, and the reason why he's doing it, because he has to teach him a lesson, has nothing to do with this. You don't even notice it. You just glide right over it. I'll give you an example. Person has a child he loves, and God forbid that child becomes very sick. And the parent has to take that child to the hospital continuously for various procedures and therapies. As difficult as that is for the parent, and as much as it infringes on the parent's life, because of the love that parent has for the child, the parent doesn't even sense and doesn't complain about that inconvenience, because all the parent wants is to have his child healthy and alive. So he doesn't have to understand, it's not a convenience because it's not even experienced as an inconvenience because of the degree of love that the parent has for his child. So if a person has love for God is at that special level, I don't need explanations. It's not even the question. What is God's doing? It's not a problem. God's decision, more power to him. But it's pain. I don't ask questions. I didn't think about it. It's rooted in the nature of understanding who God is and who the person is. That's another level of love. He's manig. God guides us. He takes us through thick and thin. Like a person has to be saved. And the person who saves you has to take you through the swamps and through very difficult terrain. But you know that ultimately, after going through the swamps and through that very rough terrain, you're going to come to a location where you're going to be in a safe haven. And you know the person is taking you there. You don't question, where are you taking me? Because you know this is a necessity to arrive there. It's never a question. So based on who you are, understanding that not only is God a borei, he's a creator, ex nihilo continuously. He wills every moment. But the way he wills every moment, which is the equivalent of ex nihilo, he's also manig. It's to achieve an objective, which is to arrive at a destination, and the destination is to bring the world to a level of perfection, that we should be in a perfect setting. So all that's necessary for that. It's a known fact when a person exercises and you lift a weight and you exercise the muscle, the way the muscle strengthens, the tissue tears and then it heals. And when it heals, that's how muscle develops. So you have to have, it has to tear, some degree of tearing of tissue and muscle. And then when it recovers, then the muscle is stronger than it was before. So there's always some degree of something to arrive at a more perfect state, at a stronger state. That's just the process. It's the same thing. We have to undergo many things, which we don't understand why that's the method. Why, when you exercise the muscle, do you have to exercise to the point where sometimes you have pain, and only then does the muscle get stronger? That's the way God created the human being. That's the physiology of a human being. It's the same thing. To be able to achieve levels of perfection, there's an expression in English, in the vernacular, no pain, no gain. That's the way it is. Nothing comes easy. Now, one time, people understood, if you want to make something of yourself, you got to pull yourself up from your own bootstraps. It was called the school of hard knocks sometimes. Life wasn't handed to you on a silver platter, where somebody else always has to do for you. It was understood, and it was never a question. Why do people have pity on me? Why are people helping me? What are you talking about? People help you. You do for yourself. You take the initiative, and that's what life is about. You don't complain. But if a person doesn't understand what life's all about, He complains, things are too difficult. And therefore, midway, he actually gives up because he understands everything has to come on a silver platter. But that's not reality. A person who understands what life is, there's no complaint. You want to succeed, you want to achieve, there's an investment on many levels, of various levels of effort and application of brawn and brain, both, a combination of both, continuously. And that's the reality. So not only is God Borei, he's Manhik. He guides all the Bruim. Many years ago, I mentioned this, in the Philippines, there was an Air Force base. It cost the United States government $2 billion to build this Air Force base. It was called Clark's Air Force Base in the Philippines. Going back maybe 35 years ago, and in the Philippines, there was a volcano. And the name of the volcano was Mount Manatibo. That was the name of the volcano. It erupted. They had to evacuate the base. They had to take all the B-52 bombers off the base. And after they took it off the base, the lava flowed into mudslides. Thousands and thousands of villages were killed due to the mudslides. And the base was destroyed. He'd say, look at all that life wasted, okay? 10 years later, they did a study and they realized that the ash that was shot into the atmosphere of this volcano when it erupted, it went 30,000 feet into the atmosphere, maybe more, and it created a covering that delayed, it sealed openings, and it delayed the world from being, due to warming, climate control, and it created a climate control. The sun was covered that the sun couldn't come through, and the value of that life-wise, financial-wise, every-wise, was worth endlessly more than that base and the people and everything else. The amount of lives that was saved because due to that climate control, due to this ash that was shot into the atmosphere. So what do we understand? What do we understand? Well, look at the cost factor. We don't see beyond our noses, literally, to that point. That's a little we understand. So God is not only is he Bori, he's Manik, l'chol habruim, all existence. Why is there a volcano? Why is there a tsunami? Why is there a tidal wave? Why is there an earthquake? Why is there anything? Everything that happens in this existence happens for a reason. But of course, the reason is directly connected to the human being to bring the world to a level of perfection. So everything, he wills it and he guides it, every aspect of creation to bring about that end result, which is called perfection. We find that the term at the time of creation, God says, Nase Odom b'tzalmenu b'nuseinu, in the plural. Let us make man in our image and our form. So if you read that literally, it seems to be, God forbid, that there was more than one creator. Of course, God said, let us make. It was a joint effort to create man. Let us make man in our image and our form. And the Talmud addresses this, but later it says, in the singular, and God made the male and the female. He created them in the singular. So that reconciles this problem. So what does it mean, naseh? Let us make in the plural. So the Midrash tells us, we learn from here that although you're in full control and the underlings have nothing to say in the matter, it's an expression of humility that you say to the underlings, let us. You speak in the us. It's never the I. It's the lesson, the takeaway is to be humble. The God, the creator, even when he created man, he said to his heavenly retinue of angels, let us make. Even though the angels themselves had no relevance to be creators, it was only God. But even when you speak to people and you're the one who makes the decisions and causes things to happen, nevertheless, due to humility, say, let us. Don't take the full credit for yourselves. But factually, it's misleading. Later, the Torah tells us, reads, and he made the male and the female. So if it's he, so is it plural or is it singular? That's how it reconciles it. That clearly confirms that the first expression was an expression of humility rather than it was a joint effort that brought about creation of man and woman. V'hu levado, and he, only him, also made v'oseh in the present. He makes v'yaseh l'chol hamasim, and he will make all that transpires. Past, present, future, it's only him, nobody else. But again, this reiterates what we said. God is not, if you say God created, and whatever, he's oseh. What does oseh mean? That's presence. He makes, he does, and he will do. What happens tomorrow, it's him doing it. What happens today, it's him doing it. What happened in the past, it's he did it. Because he willed that it should be as he willed it should be. Exactly as that. No differently. And this is what we explained yesterday in the name of Nachmanides, that what was the value of the revealed miracles in Egypt? To show and to communicate to mankind that God is more than a creator. He creates and leaves creation to the hosts of heaven, which are to the powers, to the deities, to the angels, but rather, as God went public to show that he's still involved, as he's involved on the supernatural, he's involved on the natural, and the natural is only a repetition of the supernatural, because we see it natural, because it seems to be, it's supposed to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. It's only that way because God wills it should be that way. I'll give you an example. Every day we say in the Shemon Esrei, in the Amidah, Atochoni lodem das. You endow man with discretion. Then we ask God to endow us with insight, wisdom, and discretion. Look, you're born with 189 IQ, 220 IQ. You're born, you're endowed from time of birth. What are we asking every day, 3 times a day? Endow us with intelligence, with perception, with insight, with this. Why? You're there. A person's healthy. You're asking God to heal you, to give you health. You have it. The answer is no. Because every moment that you're healthy, every moment your mind works, every moment you have that intelligence quotient, it's only because God wills it at that moment. And you have to recognize that. It's God willing it. And what you take for granted is not for granted. Because in the moment, God forbid, a person can have an aneurysm and ends. A person can have a stroke and he turns into a vegetable. So why isn't he having? Why does the circulation in the body and why does the chemical activity in the brain function in a context that he has a retentive memory and he's able to delve and understand things almost instantaneously? Why? Because God wills that discretion, that perception, that intelligence, that retention. And we recognize that. And that's what we say every day, 3 times a day. See, it's unfortunate. We read in the Torah about the curses, that if the Jews go off the rails, there's going to be, God forbid, terrible things happening. Whoever heard if you have fertile soil and you plant the seed, that it shouldn't germinate? It's unheard of. But yet, we read the curse in Torah. The Torah says, you plant, nothing's growing. You plant, it starts growing, it rains a little bit, and then the winds come and blow the mud onto the plant, onto the grain, and the grain withers encrusted in mud. You have a crop, the tree sheds its fruits before they're ready to be picked. The locust, and just endless things. We take for granted it's supposed to be this way. I always say that, living in a monarchy in a certain way, although we didn't have freedoms that we have today in a democracy, but living in a monarchy, we understand there's a monarch and we are the subjects. And although we have choice, but our choices are limited or bound to the will of the monarch. It's a mindset. There's no entitlement. Unless you're royalty, there's no entitlement whatsoever. No entitlement. It's a mindset. But if you live in the democracy, all men are created equal. All men have equal opportunity. I am entitled. Why am I entitled? Because I'm a human being. That's why I'm entitled. But people, they extend that entitlement to a point where they're not entitled. You're entitled if you invest the time and you succeed in this and that, you're entitled. Due to your being a free man and being a citizen, so forth, you're entitled. But beyond that, I think I'm entitled to succeed. Success is up to God. But if we believe it's our effort and our initiative and our education and our connections and everything else, why is he succeeding? Why aren't I succeeding? There's something wrong here. There's nothing wrong. Because if you understand that there is a God and we're under his dominance, dominion, it's like what you have the monarch and the subject understands you're entitled to nothing. Your entitlement goes to the degree that the monarch decides you're entitled. Anything more or less than that, you don't have. Because he's the one who makes that decision. So God is Osav Osav Yaseh L'chol Hamasim. He has made, he makes, he will make everything. I mentioned the other day, financial success in life or one's physical situation is called the Wheel of Fortune. What is the Wheel of Fortune? With the Wheel of Fortune, you could be on top at one moment. That wheel spins, God forbid. One moment you're on top, the moment you're on bottom of that wheel. That's how quickly things could change. What makes that determination? Whether you're on top of the wheel, the side of the wheel, the bottom of that wheel. Who spins the wheel? God spins that wheel. And therefore, no entitlement. You toe the line. If God wants you to have, you're going to have. If not, you may not have. People take initiatives and toil, and they barely eke out a living. Why? The other person barely makes a movement, and he has the Midas touch. Why? You know what the answer is? Only God knows. Only God knows. There's no basis. When you lived as a subject under a monarch, there wasn't even a question. Why? Why was he chosen? Why was I chosen? Because the king chose him and not you. That was the beginning and end of the discussion. Maybe you'll try to figure out, how do I ingratiate myself to the king? But outside of that, there's no question. You don't question the king. The king is, the monarch is in the position. He's unquestioned because you have to realize you're the subject and he's the king. And that's exactly who God is. God is the king. We are subjects. We are pawns on the board. We're presented with challenges and we have to meet those challenges that he decides for each one of us to be challenged, and we have to succeed in those challenges. And if you succeed in those challenges, regardless of your financial success or your level of recognition by humanity, you've succeeded. And the ones who think succeed materially, but they don't do what they should be doing, those people, they're low man on the totem pole. Okay, we're going to stop here today.